The winter of 1963 did not arrive in New York City gently. It did not drift in on soft snow and holiday lights. It came in iron, it came in gray. The wind off the Hudson did not simply chill the skin. It cut. It sliced through wool coats and tailored suits and found the bone beneath. It carried with it the metallic taste of machinery grinding against history, a city straining under the weight of change. In Harlem, snow never stayed white. It fell clean. It landed innocent. And within hours it became something else. Boots crushed it into slush. Taxi tires ground soot into it. Ash from factory stacks drifted down and stained it. What remained was a thick gray slurry, the color of survival. Men stepped through it looking for work. Women stepped through it looking for hope. And above it all, watching from the height of Lenox Terrace, stood Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He stood at the window of his penthouse apartment, hands folded behind his back. A cigar rested at the corner of his mouth, its ember glowing faintly like a watchful eye in the half-light. To anyone who did not know him, he looked relaxed. Silk dressing gown, pressed trousers, leather slippers. A man at ease in his kingdom. But Bumpy Johnson was never at ease. His mind was a chessboard that stretched from Harlem to Queens, from the Bronx to Westchester. Every siren was a move, every whisper was a piece sliding across squares only he could see. And tonight something was shifting. The city felt tight. Not loud. Not chaotic. Tight. Like a held breath. The civil rights movement was burning in the South. Birmingham, Mississippi, Alabama, smoke rose from churches and from angry crowds. And smoke travels, even when flames are far away. In Harlem, the conversations had changed. The jazz clubs carried tension beneath the brass. Deacons spoke in lower voices. Mothers lingered longer outside schools. People were tired. People were angry. And anger, Bumpy knew, attracted predators. The study door opened behind him. Mimi Johnson entered carrying a porcelain cup of coffee. Even in her housecoat, she moved like royalty, spine straight, chin lifted, eyes steady. She did not speak immediately. She set the coffee down beside him. "You're packing," she said softly. "I'm standing still," Bumpy replied. Mimi gave him a look. She had known him too long to accept the lie. "You pace when you're standing still." He removed the cigar and tapped ash into a crystal tray. "It's not the Italians," he said quietly. Mimi did not ask how she knew that was what he was thinking. She simply waited. "They're quiet counting money. When they're loud, I worry less." "And now?" she asked. "Now it's colder than money." Silence settled between them, not empty silence, listening silence. "It's the churches," Mimi said. That made him turn. "What do you know about the churches?" She folded her hands in front of her. Reverend Taylor canceled choir practice. Someone threw a brick through the stained glass. There was a note. Bumpy's jaw tightened. "They didn't show you." "They didn't have to. I saw the man sweeping the glass." His hands were shaking. Bumpy sat down across from her, elbows on his knees. "If it was bricks," he said quietly, "I'd send Johnny to break a few fingers and that would be the end of it." Mimi's eyes darkened. "It's not bricks." "No." He exhaled slowly. "It's organized." Earlier that evening, in the back room of the Flash Inn, a young runner named Shorty had come in shaking. Shorty hustled pool on 125th Street. He was fast with numbers and faster with gossip. Usually his news involved skimmed cash or police rotations. Tonight he was pale. He had taken a side job unloading crates in Queens, a place he did not belong. He had seen men loading industrial dynamite into the trunk of a sedan. Not construction workers. Not contractors. Men with southern accents. Men with dead eyes. He had heard them speak. They weren't talking about money. They were talking about Sunday. They were talking about 3 churches. St. Martin. Abyssinian. Mother Ame Zion. They were talking about sending a message. And they were laughing. When Bumpy finished recounting this to Mimi, the room felt smaller. "They want to bomb them," he said. Her hand rose to her mouth. "The children." "I know. Call the police." He looked at her gently. "Half the men loading those crates wear badges in the daytime." "Silence." They're not punks, Mimi, they're the clan. The word hung like smoke. And they have friends. She gripped his hand. You can't fight that. I don't intend to fight it. Then what? He stood and returned to the window. If we start shooting, he said, they bring in the National Guard, they burn Harlem down and blame us. He stared into the night. We can't give them a war. He paused. We humiliate them. Mimi studied him. Fear is a shadow, he continued. It grows when you stand away from the light. He turned toward her. I'm going to turn the lights on. An hour later, Bumpy sat in the back room of the Flash Inn. Johnny Bird cleaned his nails with a switchblade. Slick the informant shifted nervously by the door. The Grand Dragon's coming down, Slick said. Warehouse in Queens tonight. Name, Bumpy asked. Elias Thorne. The name meant something. Old money. Boardrooms by day. White Hood by night. Funding. Protection. Structure. Head of the snake. They're locked tight, Slick added. Security everywhere. Bumpy smiled faintly. I don't need the fortress, he said. I need the key. Johnny looked up. You want the boys? No guns. Johnny frowned. No guns. If we kill him, he's a martyr. Headlines write themselves. He leaned forward. We break him. Silence. And how, Johnny asked carefully, do we do that? Bumpy reached for his coat. I'm going to borrow his clothes. The road north. Snow lashed against the windshield as the black Lincoln Continental cut through Westchester. They parked on a narrow stretch of road known to be Thorne's preferred route, a miser's avoidance of tolls. A flare hissed on the roadside. The hood popped. They waited. Headlights appeared through the storm. A black Packard. It slowed. It should not have. But arrogance overrides caution. The window cracked open. Trouble, the driver called. Overheated, Bumpy replied, face shadowed. From the back seat, a brittle voice snapped, move aside. Elias Thorne. Johnny moved first. Glass shattered. One punch. Driver down. The back door opened. Thorne saw Bumpy's face and recoiled as if staring at a nightmare. You, he whispered. I'm the toll collector, Bumpy said calmly. Thorne was dragged into the snow. He pleaded. Offered money. Offered influence. I don't want your money, Bumpy said. I want your laundry. Confusion. Take off the robes. They're sacred. They're costumes. Under the flare's red light, the Grand Dragon stripped. White hood. Red satin robe. Symbols of power. Gone. Bumpy slipped them on. They fit. Almost too well. He looked at his reflection in the Packard window. A white ghost stared back. Underneath it, Harlem's sharpest mind ticked. Let's go to church, he said. The warehouse didn't look like much from the outside, just another tired brick structure crouched against the Harlem docks. Windows cracked, metal doors rusted. A single overhead lamp flickering like it was fighting to stay alive. But inside was arrogance. Inside was celebration. Inside were men who thought they had already won. The snow kept falling. And somewhere beyond the river, the city hummed, unaware that by sunrise, reputations would bleed. Music echoed off steel beams, cheap whiskey sloshed into dirty glasses, laughter loud, reckless, confident. White coats hung proudly over shoulders like medals of superiority. They were celebrating early. Men from the rival crew stood around wooden crates stacked high with powder. Money was already counted. Routes were already secured. Protection already assumed. They thought Harlem was theirs now. They thought Bumpy Johnson had finally blinked. They were wrong. Across the street, a delivery truck idled. No headlights. No rush. Just stillness. Inside the cab, Bumpy Johnson sat in darkness. His hands rested calmly on the steering wheel. Beside him sat his men. Silent and focused. They weren't anxious, they were disciplined. Bumpy looked at the warehouse door. Then at his watch. Then back at the door. He didn't want chaos. He wanted a lesson. A permanent one. No guns blazing. No dramatic shouting. No random violence. He wasn't here to spill blood. He was here to spill pride. And pride stains deeper than red. In the back of the truck were barrels of red dye. Thick industrial permanent. The kind that sinks into fabric and refuses to let go, just like humiliation. The side door of the warehouse was barely secured. Arrogance does that. It makes men careless. Two of Bumpy's men slipped out first, shadows in snow. They moved like they'd rehearsed it 100 times. Because they had a quick break of the latch, a silent slide inside, no one noticed. Bumpy walks in. He didn't sneak. He didn't rush. He walked through the front door. Alone. The music slowed. Not because someone touched it, but because fear has a frequency. And everyone felt it. A glass slipped from someone's hand. Cracked on concrete. Whispers started. That's him. No. It can't be. But it was. Bumpy Johnson. Standing in the doorway like winter itself had stepped inside. The leader of the crew, Thorne, stepped forward. White coat pristine. Smile forced. You're bold, Thorne said. Bumpy didn't answer immediately. He looked around first. He observed. Counted exits. Counted men. Measured posture. Then he spoke. You celebrating something. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Thorne smirked. Business is good. Bumpy nodded slowly. I can see that. Then he stepped further inside. No one moved to stop him. Because nobody wanted to be the first to test that moment. Behind Thorne, something shifted. One of the side doors opened. Quietly. Then another. Then another. Bumpy's men were now inside. Positioned. Strategic. Blocking exits without announcing it. The rival crew started to feel it. That invisible tightening. Like air leaving the room. Thorne noticed too. His smile faded. Bumpy removed his gloves. Slowly. Carefully folding them. Placing them on a crate. Then he looked directly at Thorne. You know what your mistake was? Thorne didn't answer. You thought territory was about product. Bumpy took a step closer. It's about respect. A pause. You don't take Harlem. Another pause. You're allowed to earn it. And then, he nodded. That was the signal. Barrels rolled forward. Lids kicked open. And before the crew could fully react, red. Thick waves of red dye exploded across white coats. Across shoulders. Across chests. Across faces. Men shouted. Some tried to run, only to find exits blocked. The dye soaked instantly. White turned crimson. Clean turned marked. Untouchable turned ridiculous. And that was the point. No gunshots. No bodies. Just pride drowning in red. Chaos. The music had stopped. Now it was shouting. Fury. Embarrassment. One man lunged. He was restrained instantly. Another swung. Dropped. Bumpy never moved fast. He stood still. Watching. Measuring. Memorizing. This wasn't about rage. This was branding. He was sending them back to the city painted. Visible. Humiliated. No one would mistake what happened here. No one would question who still ruled Harlem. Thorne stood frozen. Red dripping down his collar. His white coat ruined. His authority leaking with it. Bumpy stepped close. Very close. Close enough that only Thorne could hear. You could have talked to me. Thorne swallowed. You think this ends it? Bumpy's eyes didn't blink. No. A pause. It teaches it. Another pause. And if you come back. Silence. Then softly. I won't use dye. Thorne understood. Not a threat screamed. A promise whispered. Bumpy picked up his gloves. Put them back on. Looked around one last time. Men covered in red. Warehouse reeking of chemical stain. Pride shattered. He walked toward the door. His men followed. No rush. No scramble. Just controlled departure. Outside, snow continued falling. Covering footprints. But it couldn't cover what had just happened. One of Thorne's men tried to wipe the dye off. It smeared worse. Another cursed violently. Another stared at his reflection in a metal surface, horrified. White was status. White was untouchable. White was control. Now they looked ridiculous. Marked. Claimed. Owned. The message was louder than gunfire. Outside the river wind. Bumpy stepped into the cold air. The river wind hit his face. He inhaled deeply. No smile. No celebration. Just confirmation. Harlem had been reminded. He got into the truck. Door shut. Engine started. And they drove away. Behind them red. In front of them silence. Snow didn't stop that night. It fell soft, unaware that reputations were unraveling beneath it. By dawn Harlem had heard. Not from newspapers. From whispers. And whispers move faster than bullets. The bodegas opened early. Steam rose from manholes. Men gathered on corners like they always did. But the conversations were different. Low. Measured. Controlled. You hear about the warehouse. They say he walked in alone. No shots. Red all red. Someone laughed. Not loud. But long. Respect had returned to the room. Because Harlem didn't worship violence. It respected dominance. And dominance had just reminded everyone where it lived. Thorne's men didn't make it far before they realized the problem: the dye wouldn't wash off. It stained their coats. Their skin. Their hair. It turned them into walking announcements. By the time they stepped onto 125th Street, heads turned. Smirks followed. Doors closed. Deals evaporated. Nobody wanted to be associated with a crew that got painted instead of paid. Humiliation travels. And it doesn't need a ride. Thorne alone. Thorne didn't walk through Harlem that morning. He avoided it. Took back roads. Back entrances. Back everything. Because leaders don't fear bullets as much as they fear laughter. And the city was laughing. Not loudly. But enough. In his car, staring at his stained reflection in the rearview mirror, something shifted in him. Anger, yes. But deeper than that. Understanding. He hadn't just lost a shipment. He had misread a man. And misreading Bumpy Johnson was expensive. The Johnson home was warm. Quiet. Different world entirely. Mimi stood at the stove. Soft gospel music humming in the background. When Bumpy walked in, she didn't ask where he'd been. She already knew. She always knew. She looked at his coat. Clean. Untouched. You eat, she asked. He removed his hat. Not yet. She nodded. No interrogation. No drama. Just rhythm. Because she understood something most men in Harlem didn't. Power without restraint becomes chaos. And she watched her husband carefully. Not to control him, but to measure the weight he carried home. Later, sitting at the small kitchen table, Mimi finally spoke. Did it have to be done? Bumpy didn't look up immediately. He stirred his coffee slowly. Yes. A pause. Was it enough? That made him stop. He met her eyes. It was clean. Mimi held his gaze. Clean isn't the same as finished. He leaned back slightly. That depends on how they learned. Mimi nodded. Because she knew something else too. Humiliation either breaks a man. Or builds a monster. And which one Thorne would become? Nobody knew yet. By afternoon, every major player in Harlem had heard. Some smiled privately. Some adjusted alliances. Some sent quiet messages of loyalty. No one challenged openly. Because what Bumpy had done was surgical. He didn't overreach. He didn't escalate. He corrected. And correction commands respect. Even from enemies. The roadside meeting. It happened 2 nights later. No announcement. No witnesses. Just an empty stretch near the docks. Thorne's car parked first. Headlights off. Engine running. Bumpy arrived minutes later. Alone again. Because that was the language he spoke fluently. Thorne stepped out first. No white coat this time. Dark wool. Unmarked. Lesson absorbed. The cold air sat between them. Heavy. You embarrassed me, Thorne said. Bumpy adjusted his gloves. You embarrassed yourself. Silence. Wind moved across the water. Thorne exhaled slowly. You could have killed us. Yes. You didn't. No. Another pause. Why? Bumpy looked at him directly. Because I don't waste bullets on ego. That landed deep. Thorn swallowed. What now? That was the real question. Not revenge. Not pride. But position. Bumpy stepped closer. You don't operate without speaking to me. You don't touch Harlem roots. You don't mistake access for ownership. Each sentence calm. Measured. Final. Thorn nodded once. Slowly. Not submission. Acknowledgement. There's a difference. And if I don't agree, Thorn asked quietly. Bumpy didn't blink. The next time won't be red. No raised voice. No threat posture. Just clarity. And clarity is terrifying. The shift in power. That meeting never made headlines. But it solidified something deeper. Balance. Harlem wasn't just controlled. It was governed. There's a difference. Control is fear. Governance is structure. And structure lasts longer. Mimi's observation. That Sunday, church bells rang early. The pews filled. Women in hats. Men in press suits. Children restless. Bumpy sat beside Mimi. Still. Composed. Pastor spoke about shepherds and wolves. About strength guided by purpose. About power restrained by wisdom. Mimi glanced sideways at her husband. Because she understood the metaphor. A wolf protects his territory. A shepherd protects his people. Some men choose one. Very few understand how to balance both. As the choir sang, Bumpy's mind wandered. Not to the warehouse. Not to the humiliation. But to legacy. How long could a man rule through precision? How long before someone younger, angrier, more reckless tried something louder? He wasn't naive. Power attracts challengers. But challengers often mistake noise for strategy. And that's how they fall. Still, Mimi's earlier words echoed. Clean isn't the same as finished. He knew she was right. Because humiliation creates memory. But memory can ferment into revenge. Across town, Thorn sat in silence. The red dye had finally faded from his skin. But not from his mind. His crew watched him carefully. Waiting. For orders. For retaliation. For something dramatic. Instead, he surprised them. We adjust. That was all he said. No speeches. No rage. He had felt the temperature of Harlem. And he wasn't foolish enough to misread it twice. The city returned to its rhythm. Deals resumed. Money flowed. Roots stabilized. But under it all, a new understanding existed. Bumpy Johnson wasn't loud. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't theatrical. He was deliberate. And deliberate men are dangerous. Because they don't move unless they intend to finish something. Mimi and the mirror. One evening, Mimi caught Bumpy staring at his reflection. Not vanity. Assessment. You thinking again? She asked gently. He half smiled. Always. He stepped closer. You remember who you are outside of Harlem. He turned toward her. That's the hard part. She touched his arm softly. Don't let them pull you so deep into power that you forget peace. That stayed with him. Because ruling territory is one thing. Ruling yourself is another. Snow melted. Streets cleared. Life resumed. But if you walked past that warehouse weeks later, you'd still find traces of red in the cracks of concrete. Permanent. Subtle. Unignorable. Just like the message that night delivered. Respect isn't demanded loudly. It's enforced quietly. And Harlem understood again who governed it. Weeks passed. No retaliation. No surprise attacks. No whispers of revenge. Just adjustment. Roots ran smoother. Meetings became more respectful. Even conversations carried a different tone when Bumpy's name entered them. He hadn't increased violence. He hadn't tightened control. He had simply reminded the city that dominance didn't require noise. And that changed everything. Because fear fades. But precision stays. What made that night powerful wasn't humiliation alone. It was restraint. Anyone can pull a trigger. Anyone can escalate. It takes discipline to stop at the edge. To choose correction over carnage. To send a message without spilling blood. That's what separated Bumpy from the reckless ones. He understood something most men chasing power never grasp. Violence solves moments. Reputation solves years. And reputation, once carved properly, does half the work for you. One late evening, long after the city quieted, Bumpy sat alone in his study. Lamp dim. Window cracked slightly. Cold air drifting in. He wasn't thinking about Thorn. He wasn't thinking about territory. He was thinking about time. Power is heavy, but time is heavier. Because eventually, every wolf ages. Every ruler faces a day when the room no longer shifts at his entrance. And what remains then? Fear or respect? There's a difference. Fear disappears when the body does. Respect echoes long after. He knew which one he wanted. Mimi's truth. Mimi entered quietly. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She sat beside him, comfortable in silence. You did what you had to do, she said softly. He nodded. But don't let that become all you are. He turned to her. You think I enjoy it? I think you carry it, she replied. That was accurate. He carried Harlem. Not like a throne. Like a responsibility. And responsibility weighs more than ambition. There are men who are wolves. They hunt. They dominate. They survive through force. And then there are shepherds. They protect. They govern. They understand that strength isn't proven in chaos, it's proven in control. The rarest men, they are both. They know when to bare teeth. And when to lower their voice. That night at the warehouse, Bumpy chose teeth. But he stopped short of blood. Because even wolves understand the value of preserving the land they rule. And that's what Harlem was. Not just territory, but home. Across town, Thorn learned his lesson in silence. He didn't retreat completely. He didn't vanish. He recalibrated. He understood that challenging dominance without strategy was suicide. And surviving humiliation taught him something brutal but necessary. Power isn't taken loudly. It's earned quietly. That night of red dye reshaped him more than a bullet ever could have. Sometimes mercy wounds deeper than violence. Harlem continued. Music filled the streets again. Church bells rang. Kids played on corners. Deals were made. Money moved. But an invisible line had been redrawn. Not in blood. In understanding. Everyone knew it. No announcement needed. No public decree. Just balance restored. And balance is what keeps chaos from swallowing cities whole. Another Sunday morning. Sunlight broke gently through stained glass. The pastor spoke of stewardship. Of how power without wisdom destroys its holder. Bumpy listened carefully. Mimi's hand rested lightly on his. The sermon wasn't about crime. Or territory. Or dominance. It was about responsibility. About how the measure of a man isn't what he conquers, but what he preserves. And Bumpy understood something deeply in that moment. He didn't want to be remembered as the loudest. Or the most feared. He wanted to be remembered as the one who held Harlem together when it could have fractured. That's legacy. Not noise. Not fear. Structure. If you walk past that old warehouse long after the snow melted, you'll still find faint traces of red between the cracks in the concrete. Weather tried to erase it, time tried to soften it, but it remains. Because some messages don't wash away. They settle into foundation. And that's what that night became. A foundation reminder. Harlem isn't taken. It's governed. And governance requires discipline. Power is easy when you're reckless. Real power is quiet. It walks through the front door alone. It doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It doesn't overreach. It corrects. It teaches. And if necessary, it warns. Without ever raising its voice. That's what separated Bumpy Johnson from the rest. Not brutality, but precision. Not chaos, but control. And in a city where noise often wins attention, he proved that silence can win everything. If you enjoyed this breakdown of power, restraint, and legacy, then subscribe. Because we don't just tell stories here. We dissect power. We explore psychology. We unpack leadership, control, and consequence. And we do it properly. Hit subscribe. Stay with us and watch out for the next story.